This is the Elite 100 V2 from Bluetti, and don't let the name fool you because this is their direct follow-up to the AC180, which has arguably been the most well-loved power station in their lineup for campers and overlanders like us. That AC180 was so well-loved because it was the Goldilocks of the lineup. It was powerful enough for most people's needs. It was small enough to fit easily in a car, an SUV, or a truck, and its price to performance ratio really made it one of the best values of any portable power station from any brand. This power station then has some pretty big shoes to fill, and after spending some time with it, I've formed some pretty strong opinions. So let's talk about it. And let's start with the very first thing you notice when you look at the Elite 100 V2, and that is its size. It is physically much smaller than the AC180, 35% smaller to be exact, so it's been hitting that Ozempic pretty hard. Anyway, to illustrate what I mean, here it is next to the Elite 200 V2, which is almost identical in size to the old AC180, and you can see it's a pretty significant difference. Actually, the Elite 100 V2 is almost identical in size to the AC60P, and this is a power station with less than half the capacity and half the output. Honestly, in my opinion, the change in size alone makes this power station a huge upgrade from the AC180, and I say this because it feels like for the past few years, all the power station brands, they've been competing to have more capacity, more output, more inputs, more expandability. But the downside of all of this is that it has led to a bunch of really kind of big, heavy, bloated power stations that just don't really lend themselves all that well to car camping in the way that we do and so many overlanders and car campers do. So it's truly refreshing to see Bluetti make such an effort with the Elite series to shrink them down to a more manageable size, while at the same time not sacrificing much, if anything, in the way of capacity and output. Now, with that smaller physical size comes another benefit, and that's weight. This thing only weighs 25 pounds, which is about 11 pounds lighter than the AC180. So it's not only physically smaller, but it's light enough that almost anybody can carry it around. And that is not the case with a lot of other power stations with similar capabilities. Or as Bluetti put it in their own marketing material, and I swear I'm not making this up, the Elite 100 V2 is as compact and light as a dozen beer. So it's smaller and it's lighter, and that might have you wondering then, what does that mean for capability? Well, the answer is it's pretty similar to the AC180. The capacity of the Elite 100 V2 is 1,024 watts versus the AC180's 1,152 watts. So it is down just a little bit there, but the good news is the output remains the same at 1,800 watts or 2,700 watts of max output with Bluetti's powerlifting mode. However, there is one difference. The Elite 100 V2 can handle up to 3,600 watts of surge, where the AC180 maxed out at 2,700 watts. And ultimately, the way I look at it when it comes to capacity and output, especially output, is that 1,800 watts of output, that's enough to do electric cooking in something like an air fryer or an Instant Pot or a small portable oven, which is probably the most demanding thing that most campers and overlanders will use a power station for. So I think that's totally sufficient. Now, any power station is really only as good as its outputs, and I'm happy to say that Bluetti addressed the biggest complaint that I had and almost everybody that I know had about the AC180, and that was the USB situation. Because the AC180, while it had 5 USB ports, only one of those USB ports was a USB-C port, and it was always super annoying anytime that I needed to charge multiple devices quickly but couldn't. And so the Elite 100 V2 is actually down, as I mentioned, 1 USB. It has 4 total, but thankfully 2 of the 4 are now USB-C. Even better though, this power station gets something that even its bigger brother, the Elite 200 V2, did not. One of the USB ports, one of the USB-C ports, is 140 watts. And I think this is great because even though not every device or every cable can support 140 watt charging, it sort of future-proofs this power station. You know, when you invest in a power station like this, you're probably hoping to get 3-5 years out of it, maybe more. So it's nice to know that as charging technology for devices continues to improve, this power station should be able to keep up. In addition to the USB-Cs, there are 4 standard household style AC outputs, as you kind of have come to expect from a power station like this. It has a typical 12-volt cigarette style output. And then curiously, there are these two 5221 outputs. Now I'm gonna be honest with you, when I first saw these, I honestly had no idea what they could be used for, but consulting my good friend, the internet, I realized that you can actually buy a little adapter, which I have here. You can plug it in, and now you basically have an additional cigarette style output. So this is actually pretty handy because, for example, I always have my 12-volt fridge plugged in to this output, and that means that if I wanted to use something like a 12-volt heated blanket or a fan, which I have that we use, I've got a 12-volt fan like this, I couldn't do that before. But now with these 5221 ports, I could have my fridge running and I can plug in another 12-volt device like this little fan. So it actually adds quite a bit of functionality to this power station, and these are things that the AC180 didn't have. In fact, the Elite 200 doesn't have these 5221 ports or the 140 watt USB-C output either, so it's pretty impressive. And then one last thing to note when it comes to outputs is that there is no wireless charging pad on the top. And that's something the AC180 had, which I was always a fan of, but in fairness, it was pretty slow. And I think giving that up in favor for a second USB-C is totally worth it. When it comes to charging this power station back up, there are a bunch of different ways that you can go about doing that. Included with the power station is the standard AC style plug that is capable of fast charging from 0 to 80% in 45 minutes, so you can fast charge this, which is very nice. Also included is a solar charging cable, and the Elite 100 V2 is actually capable of a maximum solar input of 1,000 watts, which is another area where it makes improvements over the AC180, which maxed out at 500 watts of solar input. As far as other charging options go, you can charge via 12 volt from your car, though I should note that a charging cable for your car is not included with this, so it is something that you would need to buy separately. And until recently, I've always charged our power stations via 12 volt when we're on trips and when we're driving, and it works okay, but it's just really slow. So unless you're driving like 4 to 6 to 8 hours, it's hard to charge your power station back up to where you depleted it, the night before. Lately though, I've been using Bluetti's alternator charger, which they call the Charger 1, and that allows for car charging at up to 560 watts versus around 80 to 100 watts through 12 volt. I can't show the Charger 1 to you because it's installed in our truck, but it's awesome. And I highly recommend it. If you're going to use a power station like this for overland travel, something like the Charger 1 is 1000% worth it. So I've had this power station for a little while now. It's been about a month, and I've been trying to put it through as much use as possible. And one of the first things that I did when I got it was to hook it up to our 12 volt fridge, the same one that we use for camping, just to see how long it could keep it running here in the house. And so here are the results of that test. So I've got the Elite 100 hooked up to our fridge. I've had it hooked up for exactly 72 hours, so it's been hooked up for 3 days. It's still running, which is pretty impressive. And so now I wanna see how much power it has left, what it took to run this fridge for 72 hours. So let's find out. All right, you can see it right there, 14% left. So it's been about 85% of the battery to run this fridge for 72 hours. Now, this isn't the most real world pertinent test in the sense that if you're opening and closing the fridge and you're out and it's hot in your vehicle or something like that, it's not gonna last that long unless you're charging it or you've got solar running to it. But if you have it as like home battery backup and you are using it as a spare refrigerator or something like that, 3 days is pretty good for a power station as small in footprint as the Elite 100. So
I'm pretty impressed.
Now, obviously, that wasn't a very scientific test, nor was it designed to be. And by the way, if you're into that sort of testing, that really deep dive technical testing, there are some great channels out there who do that, and I'm sure that there is a video posted now for the Elite 100 V2. But it's something that I like to do anyway with any power station that I review, because I think that it highlights how efficient a power station is or isn't, especially when it's sitting idle, because some power stations just have a lot of draw when they're sitting idle, and that really reduces the amount of time that it will power our 12-volt fridge. But based on my experience with other power stations, to get 72 hours of runtime powering our fridge with a 1 kilowatt power station like this is, and to still have 15% battery left at the end of that is very good. So I'm quite happy with that. Another thing that struck me as I was testing the Elite 100 was just how quiet it is. When I got it and plugged it in for the first time, I actually thought it was broken because the fan was so quiet I could barely hear it. And with most power stations that I test, when you plug them in to AC power and you have them on their fast charge setting, they get pretty loud, especially on that fast charge setting. And the fan did eventually kick on to where I could hear it, but it was much quieter than most other power stations that I have tested recently. And that was also true when I had it hooked up to the 12-volt fridge, because it was pretty much silent the entire time. And all of that backs up Bluetti's claims, which is that the Elite 100 V2 will operate at under 30 decibels as long as it's powering something under 600 watts. And that's especially nice if you are like camping in an SUV or a van where this thing is maybe next to you at night. You're really not going to hear it. Or, to quote straight from the marketing material again, it's quieter than a whisper or a library. Okay, so I think that pretty much covers all the specs and the features of this thing. So I guess it's time for some final thoughts. Now, I opened this video by saying that I felt the AC180, which was the direct predecessor to this power station, was the Goldilocks in Bluetti's lineup, at least within the context of overlanding and car camping. And I'm happy to say that from everything I've seen testing the Elite 100 V2, it basically takes that formula that made the AC180 so great, and it improves upon it in a number of ways that actually matter to those of us using these power stations. For me personally, the lighter weight and smaller size alone would be enough to make me consider upgrading. I think that, along with the addition of the second USB-C and two 5221 outputs, make it enough of a leap forward to be crowned the new Goldilocks in the lineup. And for probably 90% of us camping out of a car, truck, or SUV, I think this one is the one to have. If you need more power for something like electric cooking, there is always the Elite 200 V2, which has also been upgraded to be smaller and lighter than its predecessor, and you can watch my full review of that power station right here. If you plan on picking up an Elite 100 V2 for yourself, you can save an additional 5% by using the link and discount code in the description of this video. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers.